The last photograph ever taken of Ananya Kapoor showed her radiant with joy on the terrace of Dubai's Burj Al Arab, her dark hair catching the golden light of sunset as she raised a champagne glass toward the camera, her diamond bracelet glittering against the backdrop of the Persian Gulf that stretched endlessly toward the horizon. The image, posted to her Instagram account on September 4th, 2023, captured what appeared to be the culmination of every dream she had harbored about escaping the predictable routine of suburban New Jersey life for something more glamorous, more worthy of the brilliant dentist who had always believed she deserved better than the quiet contentment her marriage to Rajesh had provided. 3 months later, her body would be discovered by Bedouins in the remote Liwa Desert, buried in a shallow grave beneath sand dunes that had shifted countless times since someone had hastily concealed her remains in what appeared to be a desperate attempt to hide evidence of a crime that would eventually expose the darker reality behind Dubai's glittering facade of luxury and tolerance. The woman who had abandoned her 8-year-old daughter Priya and her devoted husband to pursue what she believed was a fairy tale romance with Sheikh Omar Al Fahd had instead become another victim of a man whose public reputation as a philanthropist and modernist masked a personality capable of unspeakable violence when his sense of ownership was challenged. The transformation of Ananya, from respected healthcare professional to murder victim, had begun 18 months earlier, when her growing dissatisfaction with her marriage and her increasing exposure to social media portrayals of luxury lifestyles had made her vulnerable to the sophisticated manipulation techniques that Omar employed to identify and exploit Western women who were seeking something more exciting than their current circumstances provided. His initial contact through a professional networking platform had seemed innocent enough, beginning with compliments about her dental practice website and gradually evolving into personal conversations about her interests, ambitions, and the cultural challenges she faced as an Indian woman, balancing traditional expectations with modern aspirations. The courtship that developed over months of intensive online communication was masterfully orchestrated to exploit Ananya's specific desires for recognition, luxury, and escape from what she increasingly viewed as the mundane responsibilities of suburban motherhood and professional routine. Omar's messages combined romantic declarations with detailed accounts of his philanthropic work, his family's respected position in Emirati society, and his genuine appreciation for intelligent women who could serve as partners in both his personal life and his various humanitarian initiatives that required cultural sensitivity and international perspective. The decision to leave Rajesh and Priya was not made impulsively, despite how sudden it appeared to her family and friends who had witnessed her increasing restlessness, but had not understood the extent to which her dissatisfaction had been cultivated and channeled by someone who understood exactly how to exploit her psychological vulnerabilities. The elaborate planning involved in her departure included careful financial arrangements, legal consultations about custody and property rights, and the creation of a narrative that portrayed her decision as necessary for personal growth and authentic living, rather than acknowledging the romantic manipulation that had actually motivated her choices. Rajesh's response to Ananya's abandonment was characterized by the same methodical approach that had defined his professional success, but had perhaps contributed to her sense that their marriage lacked spontaneity and emotional intensity. His attempts to understand her motivations and convince her to return were conducted through emails and phone calls that demonstrated his genuine love and confusion, while also revealing his inability to provide the kind of dramatic gestures and passionate declarations that Omar had trained her to expect from men who truly valued her exceptional qualities and potential. The impact on 8-year-old Priya was immediate and devastating, manifesting in academic problems, behavioral issues, and profound confusion about why her mother had chosen to live with a stranger in a foreign country rather than maintaining the family relationships that had previously seemed stable and loving. The counseling that Rajesh arranged for his daughter addressed both her immediate trauma and the long-term implications of maternal abandonment during crucial developmental years, when children are forming their understanding of trust, loyalty, and family bonds. The 3 months that Ananya spent in Dubai were carefully documented through social media posts that portrayed a lifestyle of unprecedented luxury and cultural sophistication, though careful analysis of her communications during this period revealed subtle signs of increasing isolation and control that suggested her relationship with Omar was not as perfect as her public presentations indicated. Her private messages to Mira Sharma, her best friend in New Jersey, showed growing concern about Omar's possessiveness and violent temper, though these warnings were often followed by explanations and justifications that prevented Mira from fully understanding the danger her friend was facing. The murder that ended Ananya's life occurred during what Omar later claimed was an argument about her desire to visit her daughter in New Jersey, a request that he viewed as evidence of divided loyalty and potential betrayal that required decisive action to prevent. The forensic evidence would eventually reveal that she had been strangled in Omar's private residence before her body was transported to the desert burial site, though the investigation would be complicated by Omar's connections within Dubai's power structure and the cultural sensitivities surrounding crimes involving Emirati nationals and foreign victims. The discovery of Ananya's remains 3 months after her death would trigger an international investigation that tested diplomatic relationships between the United States and the United Arab Emirates, while also exposing systematic problems in how Dubai's authorities handled crimes involving wealthy nationals and foreign victims who lacked the political connections necessary to ensure thorough investigation and prosecution of their cases. The missing person report that Rajesh Kapoor filed with the Edison Police Department represented the beginning of an international investigation that would eventually expose the violent reality behind Sheikh Omar Al Fad's carefully cultivated public image as a progressive businessman and humanitarian. The initial response from local law enforcement reflected the complexity of cases involving American citizens who had voluntarily traveled to foreign countries, with jurisdictional limitations that required coordination between federal agencies and international diplomatic channels that were often slow to respond to individual family emergencies. Detective Maria Santos, the experienced investigator assigned to Ananya's case, immediately recognized that the circumstances of her disappearance were unusual and potentially dangerous, particularly given the dramatic change in her communication patterns and the increasing concern expressed by family members who had maintained regular contact throughout her time in Dubai. The systematic nature of Ananya's isolation from her support network and the suspicious timing of her last known communications suggested that she might be the victim of criminal activity rather than simply someone who had chosen to limit contact with her previous life. The investigation into Omar Al Fad's background revealed a complex individual whose public reputation as a modernist and philanthropist masked a history of volatile relationships with Western women who had been attracted to his wealth and social position. Previous partners had reported patterns of possessive behavior, violent outbursts, and systematic isolation that escalated over time, though none of these incidents had resulted in serious criminal charges due to Omar's connections within Dubai's legal and political establishment. The coordination between American and Emirati law enforcement agencies required delicate diplomatic negotiation, as Omar's status as a member of Dubai's commercial elite provided him with legal protections and political connections that could complicate any investigation into his activities. Detective Farid Al-Mansour, the Dubai police investigator assigned to coordinate with American authorities, faced institutional pressure to minimize the scope of the inquiry while maintaining sufficient cooperation to satisfy international diplomatic requirements. The analysis of Ananya's social media activity during her time in Dubai revealed subtle but consistent signs of increasing distress beneath the glamorous imagery that she had carefully curated for public consumption. Digital forensics experts identified patterns in her posting schedule, message content, and photographic composition that suggested her access to communication platforms was being monitored and controlled, with evidence indicating that some of her later posts had been composed or edited by someone else. Mira Sharma's cooperation with investigators provided crucial insights into Ananya's psychological state during her final weeks, including private communications that revealed her growing fear of Omar's controlling behavior and her increasing desire to return to New Jersey to see her daughter. These messages were particularly significant because they demonstrated that Ananya had been planning to leave Dubai despite her public presentations of happiness and fulfillment in her new lifestyle. The financial investigation revealed that Omar had gained substantial control over Ananya's assets and financial accounts during her time in Dubai, using techniques that combined romantic manipulation with sophisticated legal and banking arrangements that made it difficult for her to maintain financial independence or arrange return travel without his cooperation and approval. The search efforts that were initiated in Dubai faced significant challenges due to the vast desert territory surrounding the city and the limited resources that local authorities were willing to commit to an investigation involving a foreign national whose presence in the country was viewed by some officials as potentially problematic for Dubai's international reputation as a safe destination for tourists and expatriate residents. The diplomatic pressure that began building as Ananya's disappearance attracted media attention in the United States, created tensions between American and Emirati officials who were attempting to balance the need for thorough investigation with concerns about protecting Dubai's image as a modern, law-abiding jurisdiction that welcomed international visitors and provided them with appropriate legal protections. The psychological profile that was developed for Omar based on interviews with former associates and previous romantic partners revealed a pattern of behavior consistent with narcissistic personality disorder combined with violent tendencies that escalated when his sense of control or ownership was challenged by the women in his life who sought to maintain some degree of independence or connection to their previous relationships and identities. The breakthrough in the investigation came when Bedouin herders discovered human remains in the Liwa Desert during their seasonal migration, leading to the involvement of specialized forensic teams who were able to confirm through dental records that the body was indeed that of Ananya Kapoor. The condition of the remains and the circumstances of their discovery provided crucial evidence about the timeline and method of her death, though the advanced state of decomposition limited the forensic evidence available for determining the specific cause and circumstances of her murder. Dr. Hassan Al-Zahra, the forensic pathologist who conducted the autopsy, determined that Ananya had died from manual strangulation approximately 3 months earlier, with additional evidence suggesting that she had been killed elsewhere and transported to the burial site in an attempt to conceal the crime. The forensic analysis also revealed that she had been wearing expensive jewelry at the time of her death, contradicting any theory that robbery had been a motive for her murder. The crime scene investigation revealed tire tracks and other physical evidence that suggested the involvement of multiple individuals in transporting and burying Ananya's body, though the desert environment and the time that had elapsed since the burial made it difficult to gather conclusive evidence about the identity of the perpetrators or the specific sequence of events that had led to her death and concealment. The confrontation between Detective Al-Mansour and Omar Al-Fad occurred at Omar's luxurious villa in Emirates Hills, where the Sheikh's initial surprise and apparent grief at learning of Ananya's death quickly gave way to carefully rehearsed explanations and alibis that demonstrated sophisticated preparation for potential questioning about his role in her disappearance and death. Omar's account of their relationship and the circumstances of her departure from Dubai was internally consistent but contradicted by digital evidence and witness statements that had been gathered during the investigation, revealing systematic deception about the timeline and nature of their final interactions. His claims that Ananya had left Dubai voluntarily to return to her family were undermined by evidence showing that her passport and other identification documents had remained in his possession after her supposed departure. The international legal proceedings that followed the discovery of Ananya's body were complicated by Omar's connections within Dubai's power structure and his ability to afford sophisticated legal representation that exploited procedural technicalities and jurisdictional challenges to delay and complicate the prosecution process. His defense team's strategy focused on questioning the forensic evidence, while also attempting to portray Ananya as an unstable individual who had made poor decisions about her personal relationships and financial affairs. The media coverage of the case brought international attention to Dubai's handling of crimes involving foreign nationals, with particular focus on the challenges faced by law enforcement agencies attempting to investigate wealthy and politically connected suspects who could potentially influence the scope and thoroughness of criminal proceedings through the social and business relationships. The impact on Rajesh and Priya was devastating, as the confirmation of Ananya's murder forced them to process not only the loss of their wife and mother, but also the reality that her pursuit of a glamorous lifestyle had led directly to her death at the hands of someone she had trusted completely. The grief counseling that was arranged for both father and daughter addressed the complex emotions associated with losing someone whose choices had created the circumstances that led to her victimization. The victim advocacy work that emerged from the case included specialized support for families of Americans who had been victimized abroad, addressing the unique challenges faced by relatives who needed to navigate international legal systems, while also dealing with media attention and diplomatic complications that could interfere with their grieving process and their pursuit of justice for their loved ones. The diplomatic tensions that developed between American and Emirati officials reflected broader concerns about the protection of American citizens traveling in countries where local power structures might shield wealthy criminals from prosecution, creating policy discussions about enhanced consular services and international cooperation in cases involving violent crimes against foreign nationals. The investigation into Omar's previous relationships revealed additional evidence of controlling and violent behavior that had been reported to authorities but not thoroughly investigated due to his social status and political connections, highlighting systematic problems in how Dubai's criminal justice system handled domestic violence and other crimes involving powerful individuals and vulnerable foreign nationals. The arrest of Sheikh Omar Al Fahd required careful coordination between international law enforcement agencies and Dubai's judicial authorities, as his prominent social position and extensive business connections created political complications that threatened to interfere with the criminal prosecution process. The evidence gathered during months of investigation, including forensic analysis, digital communications, and witness testimony, provided a comprehensive case that documented both his relationship with Ananya and his involvement in her murder and the subsequent attempt to conceal the crime. The search of Omar's properties revealed additional evidence of his controlling behavior, including surveillance equipment that had been used to monitor Ananya's communications and movements during her time in Dubai, as well as personal belongings that contradicted his claims about the circumstances and timing of her departure from his residence. The discovery of this evidence provided crucial corroboration for the prosecution's theory about the systematic nature of his abuse and the premeditated aspects of her murder. The international legal proceedings required unprecedented cooperation between American and Emirati judicial systems, creating procedural challenges that tested existing treaties while also establishing new precedents for prosecuting cases involving domestic violence and murder that crossed international boundaries and involved defendants with substantial wealth and political influence. The psychological evaluation of Omar that was conducted as part of the legal proceedings revealed personality disorders and behavioral patterns that were consistent with individuals who viewed romantic partners as possessions rather than independent persons, with expert testimony explaining how his need for control and his violent responses to perceived challenges to his authority had escalated over time to the point where murder became his preferred solution to relationship conflicts. The victim impact statements provided by Rajesh and other family members offered devastating testimony about the long-term effects of Ananya's murder on her surviving relatives, particularly her young daughter, who had lost both her mother and her sense of security about family relationships and adult trustworthiness. The testimony was crucial for helping the court understand the human cost of domestic violence that escalated to murder, particularly in cases involving international relationships and cultural differences that could complicate victims' ability to seek help. The prosecution's case was built around the systematic nature of Omar's controlling behavior and the evidence showing that Ananya's murder was the culmination of months of escalating abuse rather than an impulsive act of violence during a domestic dispute. The detailed timeline of their relationship and the documentation of his attempts to isolate her from her support network demonstrated clear intent and premeditation that supported charges of first-degree murder. The defense strategy attempted to minimize Omar's culpability by arguing that cultural differences and miscommunication had contributed to relationship conflicts that spiraled out of control, while also questioning the reliability of forensic evidence and suggesting that other individuals might have been responsible for Ananya's death. This approach required acknowledging that their relationship had been troubled while attempting to shift responsibility away from Omar's deliberate actions. The international media coverage of the trial brought sustained attention to issues of domestic violence in international relationships and the particular vulnerabilities faced by foreign women who became involved with wealthy men in countries where their legal protections might be limited by cultural factors and political considerations that favored local nationals over foreign victims. The sentencing phase of the trial focused on determining appropriate punishment that reflected both the premeditated nature of the murder and the systematic abuse that had preceded it, while also considering the international implications of the case and its potential impact on diplomatic relationships between the countries involved in the prosecution. The civil litigation that accompanied the criminal proceedings enabled Ananya's family to pursue financial compensation for their losses, while also establishing legal precedents for holding perpetrators of international domestic violence accountable for the comprehensive harm caused by their crimes, including the long-term psychological damage inflicted on surviving family members. The ongoing investigation into Omar's associates and business activities revealed connections to other cases involving missing foreign nationals and suspicious circumstances that suggested Ananya's murder might not have been an isolated incident, but rather part of a broader pattern of criminal behavior that had been protected by wealth and social connections. The conviction of Sheikh Omar Al-Fahd on charges of first-degree murder represented a landmark achievement in international cooperation for prosecuting domestic violence cases that crossed national boundaries. Though the life sentence imposed by Dubai courts reflected the serious nature of the crime, while also demonstrating the UAE's commitment to justice, despite the political complications created by prosecuting a prominent member of the business community. The asset forfeiture proceedings that followed the criminal conviction resulted in substantial financial recovery that provided some compensation for Ananya's family, while also establishing important precedents for holding wealthy criminals accountable for their actions, regardless of their social status or political connections. The forfeited assets included real estate, investment accounts, and luxury items that had been purchased with funds that were now designated for victim compensation and restitution. The international cooperation that had been essential for investigating and prosecuting Omar's crimes established new protocols for handling cases involving domestic violence and murder that crossed international boundaries, creating frameworks that would improve law enforcement responses to similar cases, while also providing better protection and support for potential victims who might be vulnerable to exploitation by wealthy predators operating in international contexts. The psychological research that emerged from the case contributed to enhanced understanding of the manipulation techniques used by wealthy abusers to isolate and control their victims, while also advancing knowledge about the cultural and social factors that could make foreign women particularly vulnerable to exploitation when they became involved in relationships with powerful men in countries where their legal protections and social support systems were limited. The victim support services that were enhanced in response to the case included specialized assistance for families of Americans who had been victimized abroad, addressing the unique challenges faced by relatives who needed to navigate international legal systems, while also dealing with grief and trauma that were complicated by the public nature of high-profile criminal proceedings and media coverage. The diplomatic initiatives that resulted from the case included enhanced cooperation agreements between American and Emirati law enforcement agencies, creating systematic improvements in how cases involving American victims would be investigated and prosecuted, while also establishing better communication channels between consular officials and local authorities who were responsible for protecting foreign nationals. The legislative changes that were prompted by the case included enhanced penalties for domestic violence crimes involving foreign victims, improved resources for international cooperation in criminal investigations, and strengthened victim protection services that addressed the unique needs of individuals who had been exploited through international relationships and cultural manipulation. The academic research that was inspired by the case contributed to enhanced understanding of international domestic violence, while also advancing knowledge about effective prevention strategies and therapeutic interventions for families, recovering from the loss of loved ones to violent crimes that involved cultural exploitation and systematic manipulation by wealthy and powerful perpetrators. The corporate security consulting industry that emerged in response to the case provided specialized services for individuals and organizations seeking to assess the risks associated with international relationships and business ventures, particularly in contexts where cultural differences and power imbalances might create vulnerabilities that could be exploited by predatory individuals with substantial resources. The insurance industry's response to the case included enhanced coverage options for families of Americans victimized abroad, while also implementing improved risk assessment procedures that could help identify potentially dangerous situations before they resulted in serious harm to policyholders who were traveling or living in foreign countries. The ongoing monitoring of similar cases revealed that while Omar's specific criminal network had been successfully prosecuted, other wealthy predators continued to operate using similar techniques while adapting their methods to avoid the detection strategies that had led to his conviction, highlighting the need for continued vigilance and international cooperation in combating such sophisticated criminal enterprises. The long-term recovery process for Rajesh and Priya Kapoor required extensive therapeutic intervention and community support to help them rebuild their lives after the devastating loss of Ananya, while also processing the complex emotions associated with her decision to abandon their family in pursuit of what proved to be a fatal relationship with someone who viewed her as a possession rather than a person deserving of love and respect. The father-daughter relationship evolved significantly during their shared grieving process, as Rajesh learned to balance his natural tendency toward emotional reserve with Priya's need for open communication about her mother's choices and the circumstances that led to her death. The family counseling sessions revealed both the strength of their bond and the ways that Ananya's abandonment and subsequent murder had affected their ability to trust others and feel secure about their future together. The impact on their Indian American community was complex and lasting, creating discussions about cultural expectations, women's autonomy, and the risks associated with pursuing romantic relationships that cross significant cultural and economic boundaries. Some community members expressed sympathy for Ananya's desire for a more exciting life, while others criticized her decision to abandon her family responsibilities for what they viewed as selfish pursuit of luxury and status. The victim advocacy work that Rajesh eventually undertook grew from his recognition that other families might be facing similar situations involving international relationships and cultural exploitation, providing them with practical guidance about warning signs and legal resources, while also contributing to enhanced public awareness about the risks faced by individuals who became romantically involved with wealthy foreigners whose intentions and character might not be what they appeared to be. The educational initiatives that emerged from the case included programs designed to help women recognize manipulative behavior in international romantic relationships, while also providing information about legal protections and support services available to American citizens who encountered dangerous situations while living or traveling abroad. The legislative advocacy that Rajesh supported included enhanced protections for American citizens in international relationships, improved consular services for families of victims abroad, and strengthened cooperation agreements between law enforcement agencies that would facilitate investigation and prosecution of crimes against Americans in foreign countries. The psychological research that continued to grow from the case contributed to enhanced understanding of how cultural manipulation and economic inducements were used to exploit vulnerable individuals, while also advancing knowledge about effective therapeutic interventions for families recovering from losses that involved both violence and abandonment by trusted family members. The international cooperation initiatives that were supported by victim advocates included enhanced information sharing between countries and improved protocols for protecting foreign nationals who might be vulnerable to exploitation by wealthy predators operating in international contexts where cultural differences and power imbalances created opportunities for systematic abuse. The corporate partnerships that developed around victim protection included collaborations with technology companies to develop better screening and warning systems for international dating platforms, as well as enhanced security services for individuals who needed protection while traveling or living abroad in potentially dangerous situations. The ongoing impact of the case extended beyond individual justice to include systematic improvements in how international domestic violence cases were investigated and prosecuted, while also contributing to enhanced awareness about the particular vulnerabilities faced by foreign women who became involved with powerful men in countries where their legal protections and social support systems were limited. The memorial services and community events that were organized in Ananya's honor focused on celebrating her professional achievements and her role as a mother, while also raising awareness about domestic violence prevention and the importance of maintaining supportive relationships that could provide assistance to individuals who might be experiencing manipulation or abuse in their personal relationships. The establishment of the Ananya Kapoor Foundation represented Rajesh's transformation from victim to advocate, creating a permanent institution dedicated to protecting women from international domestic violence, while also supporting families who had lost loved ones to crimes involving cultural exploitation and systematic manipulation by wealthy predators operating across international boundaries. The International Conference on Cross-Cultural Domestic Violence that the Foundation sponsored annually brought together survivors, law enforcement officials, researchers, and policymakers from around the world to share knowledge about criminal techniques while also developing more effective prevention strategies and support services that address the unique challenges posed by international relationships involving significant power imbalances. The research initiatives that the Foundation funded contributed to enhanced understanding of cultural manipulation techniques while also advancing knowledge about effective prevention strategies and therapeutic interventions for individuals who might be vulnerable to exploitation through international romantic relationships that appeared to offer escape from unsatisfying circumstances but actually led to systematic abuse and potential violence. The victim support services that the Foundation operated included specialized counseling for families affected by international domestic violence, legal assistance for navigating complex international legal proceedings, and practical guidance for individuals who needed help extracting themselves or their loved ones from dangerous relationships involving foreign nationals with substantial resources and political connections. The educational materials that the Foundation produced provided practical information about recognizing warning signs of international domestic violence, while also raising awareness about the sophisticated psychological manipulation techniques used by wealthy predators to identify and exploit vulnerable women who were seeking more exciting or luxurious lifestyles than their current circumstances provided. The policy advocacy that the Foundation undertook included support for enhanced protections for Americans in international relationships, improved cooperation between law enforcement agencies across different countries, and strengthened victim support services that addressed the unique challenges faced by individuals who were exploited through cultural manipulation and economic inducements. The corporate consulting services that the Foundation provided included risk assessment and safety planning for individuals and organizations involved in international business or personal relationships, with particular focus on identifying potential dangers and developing strategies for maintaining safety while pursuing legitimate international opportunities. The international cooperation initiatives that the Foundation supported included enhanced intelligence sharing between countries and improved protocols for protecting foreign nationals who might be targeted by sophisticated criminals operating in international contexts where cultural differences and legal complexities could provide cover for systematic abuse and exploitation. The psychological treatment protocols that were developed through Foundation research provided specialized approaches for helping families recover from losses involving both abandonment and violence, while also addressing the cultural and social factors that could make certain individuals vulnerable to exploitation by predators who understood how to exploit cultural expectations and economic aspirations. The media initiatives that the Foundation supported included responsible journalism guidelines for reporting on international domestic violence cases and educational documentaries that provided awareness about the risks, while also honoring the memory of victims who had been exploited through their desire for love, excitement, or economic improvement. The legislative achievements that resulted from the Foundation's advocacy work included enhanced penalties for international domestic violence, improved victim compensation programs, and strengthened cooperation requirements that facilitated investigation and prosecution of crimes involving American victims and foreign perpetrators operating across international boundaries. The 10-year anniversary of Ananya's murder marked a significant milestone in international efforts to combat cross-cultural domestic violence, with the Foundation established in her memory, having become a globally recognized leader in victim advocacy, research funding, and policy development that had contributed to meaningful improvements in protection services and law enforcement capabilities across multiple countries and cultural contexts. The technological innovations that had been developed through Foundation-funded research included advanced screening algorithms for international dating platforms and early warning systems that could identify potentially dangerous relationship patterns before they escalated to serious abuse or violence, providing tools that could help protect vulnerable individuals while also supporting legitimate international relationships and cultural exchange. The international law enforcement cooperation that had been essential for investigating Omar's crimes had evolved into permanent frameworks for combating international domestic violence, with specialized units in multiple countries sharing intelligence and coordinating operations that had disrupted numerous criminal networks, while also establishing protocols for protecting vulnerable foreign nationals from exploitation. The victim support services that had been enhanced in response to Ananya's case continued to provide specialized assistance for individuals and families affected by international domestic violence, while also contributing to enhanced understanding of effective therapeutic interventions that help survivors rebuild their capacity for trust and authentic relationships after experiencing systematic manipulation and abuse. The educational impact of Ananya's story extended far beyond formal prevention programs to include widespread public awareness about the dangers of international relationships involving significant power imbalances and the importance of maintaining supportive relationships that could provide objective perspectives when romantic involvement might be clouding judgment about potential risks. The policy changes that the Foundation's advocacy had helped achieve continued to influence victim protection measures and law enforcement cooperation, while also establishing legal precedents for prosecuting international domestic violence cases and providing compensation for families who had lost loved ones to crimes involving cultural exploitation and systematic manipulation. The psychological research that had grown out of Ananya's case continued to advance understanding of cultural manipulation techniques, while also contributing to enhanced knowledge about resilience factors and recovery strategies that could help both potential victims recognize dangerous situations and survivors rebuild their lives after experiencing systematic abuse. The corporate partnerships that the Foundation had established continue to produce innovative solutions for international safety and risk assessment, while also providing resources for legitimate businesses and cultural exchange programs that needed to balance security concerns with authentic opportunities for international relationship building and economic development. The diplomatic relationships that had been strengthened through the investigation and prosecution of Ananya's case continued to facilitate beneficial cooperation between nations, while also supporting international efforts to combat domestic violence and protect vulnerable individuals from exploitation by predators who operated across cultural and legal boundaries. The ongoing monitoring of criminal networks revealed that while Omar's specific case had been successfully prosecuted, similar predators continued to operate using adapted techniques while exploiting new technologies and social platforms, highlighting the continued relevance of the prevention strategies and support systems that had been developed in response to Ananya's murder. The psychological treatment protocols that had been developed through Foundation research continued to provide specialized approaches for helping families recover from losses involving both abandonment and violence, while also addressing the unique challenges faced by children whose development had been affected by parental abandonment, followed by the trauma of learning that the abandoning parent had been murdered. The transformation of Priya Kapoor from victim to advocate represented one of the most powerful aspects of her family's response to tragedy. As the young woman who had lost her mother to international domestic violence channeled her experience into meaningful work that protected other vulnerable individuals, while also honoring her mother's memory through practical crime, prevention, and victim support efforts that address the complex intersection of cultural exploitation and gender-based violence. The international speaking engagements that Priya undertook despite her young age brought unique perspectives to conferences and educational programs where her first-hand experience as a child victim of international domestic violence provided insights that could not be gained through academic study alone, while also demonstrating the long-term impact of such crimes on surviving family members who had to rebuild their lives after devastating losses. The research collaborations that both Rajesh and Priya participated in with academic institutions contributed to enhanced understanding of the intergenerational effects of domestic violence, while also advancing knowledge about effective prevention strategies and support systems that could help families recover from trauma, while also building resilience against future victimization. The policy advocacy that had grown from their personal experience included support for enhanced protections for children of domestic violence victims, improved international cooperation in cases involving cross-cultural crimes, and strengthened educational programs that could help potential victims recognize manipulation techniques before becoming fully exploited by sophisticated predators. The victim support network that had developed around their foundation's work provided ongoing assistance for individuals and families affected by international domestic violence, while also creating advocacy platforms that maintained pressure for continued improvements in prevention, investigation, and prosecution of sophisticated crimes that exploited cultural differences and power imbalances. The technological initiatives that the Foundation supported included development of artificial intelligence systems that could identify potential victims of international domestic violence and provide early warnings about dangerous relationship patterns, while also supporting legitimate international relationships by helping users distinguish between authentic and manipulative communications across cultural boundaries. The educational materials that had been developed through their advocacy work continued to provide valuable information about recognizing international domestic violence, while also reducing stigma associated with victimization by sophisticated criminals who exploited normal human desires for love, excitement, and economic improvement through carefully crafted manipulation techniques. The corporate partnerships that the Foundation maintained continued to produce innovative solutions for international safety and security, while also supporting legitimate business and cultural exchange programs that needed to balance risk management with authentic opportunities for beneficial international relationship building and economic development. The psychological research that had been inspired by their case continued to advance understanding of how cultural manipulation and economic inducements were used to exploit vulnerable individuals, while also contributing to enhanced knowledge about therapeutic interventions that could help survivors rebuild their capacity for trust and authentic emotional connection. The ongoing impact of their advocacy work extended beyond individual protection to include systematic improvements in international cooperation, victim support, and domestic violence prevention that continued to evolve in response to new criminal techniques, while maintaining focus on the human cost of crimes that exploited cultural differences and economic aspirations. The Memorial Scholarship Program that was established in Ananya's honor provided educational opportunities for young women pursuing careers in healthcare and social services, while also supporting research into domestic violence prevention and cross-cultural communication that could help reduce the vulnerabilities that made individuals susceptible to exploitation by international predators. 15 years after Ananya Kapoor left her family in New Jersey to pursue what she believed was a fairy tale romance with a Dubai sheikh, only to be murdered when she tried to maintain some connection to her previous life, her story continues to serve as both a tragic warning about the deadly consequences of international domestic violence and an inspiring example of how personal loss can be transformed into meaningful advocacy that protects other vulnerable individuals from similar exploitation and victimization. The Ananya Kapoor Foundation has become an internationally recognized institution that has directly assisted over 1,200 families, while also funding research and policy initiatives that have contributed to systematic improvements in domestic violence prevention, victim protection, and international law enforcement cooperation across multiple countries and cultural contexts. The legislative changes that their advocacy helped achieve have been adopted across numerous jurisdictions and have contributed to more effective prosecution of international domestic violence cases, while also providing enhanced resources for victims and their families who needed support navigating complex legal systems and recovery processes that were complicated by cultural factors and international jurisdictional challenges. The international law enforcement cooperation that was essential for investigating Omar's crimes has evolved into permanent frameworks for combating cross-cultural domestic violence, with specialized units sharing intelligence and coordinating operations that have disrupted hundreds of criminal networks, while also establishing protocols for protecting vulnerable foreign nationals from systematic exploitation and abuse. The victim support services that were enhanced in response to Ananya's case continue to provide specialized assistance for individuals and families affected by international domestic violence, while also contributing to enhanced understanding of effective therapeutic interventions that help survivors rebuild their capacity for trust and authentic relationships after experiencing cultural manipulation and systematic abuse. The psychological research that has grown out of their case continues to advance understanding of how cultural expectations and economic aspirations can be exploited by sophisticated predators, while also contributing to enhanced knowledge about resilience factors and prevention strategies that help potential victims recognize dangerous situations before becoming fully victimized. Priya's development into a successful advocate and researcher who has channeled her childhood trauma into meaningful social contribution demonstrates that recovery from even the most devastating family losses is possible through appropriate support, therapeutic intervention, and commitment to transforming personal suffering into protection for others who might face similar vulnerabilities and exploitation. The relationship between Rajesh and Priya has not only survived the traumatic loss of Ananya, but has become stronger through their shared commitment to honoring her memory, while also protecting other families from similar victimization, with both of them contributing to advocacy work that addresses the complex intersection of cultural manipulation, economic exploitation, and gender-based violence. The technological innovations that have resulted from foundation-funded research continue to provide enhanced safety tools for individuals involved in international relationships, while also supporting legitimate cultural exchange and business opportunities that require balancing security concerns with authentic opportunities for beneficial cross-cultural connection and economic development. The ongoing impact of their advocacy work extends beyond individual protection to include systematic improvements in international cooperation, victim support, and domestic violence prevention that continue to evolve in response to new criminal techniques, while maintaining focus on the human cost of crimes that exploit cultural differences and economic vulnerabilities. The story of Ananya Kapoor serves as a permanent reminder that while the pursuit of love, excitement, and economic improvement represents natural human desires, these aspirations must be balanced with awareness of the sophisticated predators who exploit such normal needs to facilitate devastating crimes that can destroy lives and families across international boundaries. Her legacy lives on through the thousands of potential victims who have been protected by the awareness programs her family's advocacy made possible, the hundreds of survivors who have received support through their foundation services, and the systematic improvements in law enforcement and victim protection that emerged from their comprehensive response to personal tragedy, ensuring that her death was ultimately transformed into lasting positive change that continues to benefit vulnerable individuals worldwide.